And we are live. What's going on, YouTube Live? It's your boy Billy Rowe. Today is Wednesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. And if it is Wednesday, you know what that means. It's time for the Wednesday word. That's Wednesday word. Jumping straight into it. Tonight's topic is growth gaps. As always, well, first, before as always, hello, Brother Bruce. Hello, Sister Terrelyn. As always, with my topics, I like to share what I mean by the topic. So, what do I mean by the topic growth gaps? What I mean by the topic of growth gaps is we arrive at these points in our life where everything that we know, all of our experiences, everything that we're good at reaches capacity, we'll call it. And when it reaches capacity, in order to get to the next level, we have to do some development. And that development portion is that growth gap to where we can start moving forward and building upon the areas that we want to build upon to the next cap. So when I think about growth gaps, really what I'm talking about is our capacity, the capacity that our growth has, and not only the capacity that our growth has, but the ability that we have to expand to new areas and what it takes to expand to that new area. So tonight on the first row, I have 3 tools for you that I want to share with you when it comes to these growth gaps. How to navigate them and how we can use them to our advantage. So let's jump straight into it. Starting off with tool number 1. The first tool when it comes to growth gaps is growth is a process that is continually in motion. And man, that tool, understanding that tool is vital. I think, and it's crazy because I didn't share this topic with really a bunch of people, but I've been having these conversations that have been surrounded by this growth gap mentality. And the reason why understanding that growth is a process that is continually in motion is we are meant to run into these gaps. I think sometimes we get frustrated when we hit these growth gaps and we allow it to say, well, I'm not going to do it because it's getting hard, because it's getting difficult, or whatever it may be. You don't want this sweatshirt, this first row. It's not out yet. Exclusive, only first row, Billy Rowe. That's it. But as we hit these growth gaps, we get frustrated because things are going at a pretty good rate and pretty good pace, and it almost feels like things kind of come effortless to us. It's like tying my shoe is easy now. Walking outside right now, fortunately, I have my health. That's pretty easy for me to do. But then playing basketball this week, when you haven't played basketball in a long time and you've gained weight, it's not as easy to do anymore. And so I'm like reaching a growth gap, and it's like, okay, I have a choice. Am I going to be frustrated and not play basketball anymore? Or am I going to say, okay, what are the things I need to do to get through this gap to get back to the space where I can play basketball? And really, these growth gaps, we're meant to reach these growth gaps. Again, growth is a process that's continually in motion. So since it's continually in motion, these moments were actually meant to be difficult. If everything was easy, we probably wouldn't develop ourselves any further because everything's easy. If I could just pick up a flute and start playing it without ever having to practice it, or nod to the Matrix that I got done watching this past week. If I could just have somebody upload the information in my head, and all of a sudden I know how to fly a helicopter, yeah, that would be really easy, and nothing would require effort or intention. But these processes were designed because we can't upload information in our head. This situation was designed, or growth gaps were designed to help elevate us to the next level. So as frustrating as they can be, as challenging as they can be, realize that when you hit them, you're now at an opportunity. It's a continual process. You got to choose if you're going to take the opportunity. It's continually in motion, but you're either going to go into that developmental gap, or you're going to say, okay, well, I'm good on this side of the mountain. I'm not going to traverse down into the canyon to go back up and be on the other side of the mountain. I'm just going to stay where I'm at. And really, that's where the growth gap causes us to make a decision. We can either choose to incline, which is going up through that gap and getting developed. We can choose to decline and say, you know what, not only I don't want to be at this point, I want to take some steps back to where things were easier and I don't have to worry about hitting this cap again. Or we can just plateau and stay in the area where we're like, well, this is my capacity, this is my ability, and this is where I'm going to stay. So to define those, again, the incline is the struggle of crossing the gap. The decline is where we decide to turn back and step away from that cap or gap. And then the plateau is where we operate at our current full ability, and we're just comfortable staying there. It's really the plateau is the complacent portion where we just stay where we're at. And unfortunately, the gap doesn't stay where it's at, because when you get to this growth gap, it's like you come and you have some momentum. So you kind of start bumping into that gap a little. You probably like end up in the gap a little bit. And then you figure out, oh, shoot, I don't know everything that I need to know. And if you back down instead of pushing through and inclining or working to climb through that gap, then what ends up happening is now you're not in the place where the gap was the space of the gap is not the same space as it was when you initially could have started. And then sometimes technology, sometimes the world, sometimes people just change, and that can cause the gap to increase. So the more you stay on the wrong side of the gap, the more you allow yourself to either decline or stay on the plateau. Unfortunately, that gap is not guaranteed to stay in the same distance or the same length. That gap may expand, it may contract, but odds are it's going to expand and you're going to have more work to do. So that's tool number one. When it comes to growth gaps. Growth is a process that is continually in motion. Tool number two, when it comes to growth gaps, is there's always a challenge looming. And I say this not to discourage you from like, dang, you're going to get through this challenge and there's going to be another one waiting on the other side of it. But I say this because of the fact that the reason there's always another challenge looming or another challenge waiting once you cross a growth gap is because you just haven't grown yet to the level of those challenges. So when you got to your first growth gap, let's say, being a baby, we get to the first growth gap of crawling and we crawl, and then now we're pretty good at crawling and we can maneuver around pretty well. And you'll see babies do this. You'll see a baby who's learned how to stand up, who's beginning to learn how to walk, decide to fall down and crawl because it's faster, because it's easier. Well, there's always another challenge looming. So even though you got past crawling, even though you're now past walking, even though you're now past running, there's always going to be another challenge that takes place. And it doesn't have to be running or anything like that. It could just be like, now you got to learn how to drive. Now you got to learn how to write essays. There's always another challenge looming. As we cross these gaps, anticipate that there'll be another challenge that you're going to rise up to that's going to say, hey, everything that you have in the tank is not enough right now, and you need to add some more fuel to the tank to get through this gap. And that's okay. I don't want you to feel discouraged by that, because the bonus to that is some gaps that we will encounter before we're not even to the gap that we're supposed to be at. We'll encounter a growth gap way up here. I don't know if you can see my hands, but we'll encounter a growth gap way up here, but we haven't encountered this first growth gap. So we'll see here and be able to say, oh, snap, I'm not ready for this. Let me step to here. Oh, snap, there's another growth gap that I have to hit. And we'll go through that growth gap, but we'll at least have the understanding that, hey, that other challenge that I experienced up here that I wasn't ready for, it's time to start getting ready for that now as I'm moving through this comfort zone of growth before I reach that growth gap. And so those are the first two tools. That's the second tool when it comes to that. There's always a challenge looming also reminds me of like college, that college has prerequisites for certain classes. I can't just jump into college and be like an English 3. I have to go English 101, English 102, English 103. Now, there's some Englishes that you might be able to test out of, which just means you have the competencies necessary to move to that next level. But still, you have to take the test. So until you take that test, they don't know that you've already made it through that growth gap. But once you take the test, they say, oh, you're not at this level of the growth gap. You're up here. And now you need to start doing the development for English 102 or whatever the class may be. Those prerequisites are there, and they're letting you know that, hey, there's some challenges that are lying ahead for you. But the purpose of those prerequisites, whether it's college or life in general, the purpose of the prerequisite is that you are prepared when the time comes to go to the next level. You don't want to arrive at the next level and not have the things that you need. And then really quick, on the other side of growth gaps, some growth gaps are negative and they're created by us. And this is where the challenge can also be looming, is that our habitual behaviors or our habitual bad choices and decisions can cause gaps to be created. um, for that get cause gaps to be created for us, whether it's in the professional realm, in the personal realm. One of the challenges that I experienced very early in life as a young man was emotion in the emotional realm. I was doing things to kind of squelch my emotional development because I didn't want to deal with emotions. The problem with that is then I run up to these emotional challenges, and instead of the gap just being like, oh, well, I've been dealing with my emotions and I'll step over it, it's like, no, I gotta like get a running head start with a what do they call them, a hang glider, and try to glide across to the other side of the chasm. And so realize that sometimes the growth gaps that we are experiencing are a result of the poor decisions or the bad habits that we've picked up along the way that we fostered. I always tell people the mind is an unbiased plot of land to sow ideas, good or bad, into. If you put good into it, good will come from it. If you put bad into it, bad will come from it. The mind is neutral; it does not care. It's just like, hey, you planted the seed, you watered the seed. My job is to grow that seed. So that's one thing I also want you to take with you. With there's always a challenge looming, and that brings us to tool number three. Tool number three on growth gaps. This is the light at the end of the tunnel, I would call it, is as we grow stronger, we close the gap. And in all honesty, that's the good news about all growth gaps. As we approach them, as we hit them, as we feel like we're falling short, um, when we commit to moving through the growth gap, when we commit to the activities necessary to reach the next level, that gap begins to shrink and shrink and shrink. And eventually you find yourself at the next plateau, moving comfortably again. And you'll remember the times where, dang, I remember when this was hard. I remember when this was difficult. I've been an analyst now for over 10 years. And I remember when I started, though I was analytical, there was parts about analysis that were foreign to me and they were difficult for me to interact with. They were difficult for me to comprehend. But I kept pushing and I kept pushing and I kept pushing and I kept pushing. And now, 10 years later, I'm like, I can't even remember what parts were difficult for me as an analyst. And that's a good thing, because what that means is it tells me that not only have I closed that gap and plateaued and moved through another level and closed that gap and plateaued, I'm probably like 2 or 3 gaps past the first gap that I encountered, when I could have said, you know what, this is hard. I'm only going to do so much, or I quit, or I don't want to do it, or I can decline and back off a little bit and just be a good whatever, like level 1 analyst or whatever it may be. Instead of making those decisions, I continue to drive my growth, and cross over these gaps that have now taken me to a place to where, though I remember it was difficult when I started off as an analyst, some of the things that were difficult, I don't recall what those things were now, because I moved through so many gaps that I have progressed. I've progressed enough through so many gaps that everything up here now is like new and challenging. But everything that I started with in the first couple of gaps, that stuff is like second nature to me now. The other thing about the growth gaps that I'm sorry about growth gaps, how they can close, if you liken it to being in elementary school. When you're in first grade, you know, we used to play tag a lot when I was a kid. So when you're in first grade and you're playing tag, the playground feels ginormous. Like, it takes a lot of effort to climb up into the playground equipment, to run up the slide, even though you're not supposed to do that, to make these jumps. I remember jumping off of the swing and feeling like, oh man, I'm flying. Now as an adult, I don't feel like that, because the growth that has taken place, the physical growth that has taken place. And by the time you're in sixth grade, you know the playground like the back of your hand. Your ability to jump off of things, your ability to climb things faster, your ability to evade in tag, it improves because of the fact that you're constantly interacting with it. So realize that the whole purpose of a growth gap is to develop us and to make us stronger. And the energy and the effort and the intention that is necessary to overcome a growth gap requires that we become stronger. It requires that we become more competent. It requires that we become better, not in the sense of a better because we're inadequate, but better, more developed, and more prepared for the things that are on the other side of the growth gap. That is the purpose of a growth gap. So as frustrating as they can be, as challenging as they can be, as unending as they can feel, realize that at the end of the day, these growth gaps are opportunities for us. When we always say we're on a new level or next level, living the best life, that is what this growth gap is for. It's to help us get to our best level, to our best authentic self. That is what it's for. And if you can grab a hold of that, every time you get to that place where you start to feel frustrated because things are not as easy as they used to be, you'll be able to tell yourself, must be time to grow. It must mean that the things that I'm currently proficient in are not adequate enough to get me to where I want to be. It's time to grow so that I can continue to move forward to where I want to be. So, really quick to go over the 3 tools for you in regards to growth gaps. The tool number 1 is growth is a process that is in continual motion. Tool number 2 is there's always a challenge looming. Don't worry, there's always going to be something after the challenge you overcome. And tool number 3 is as we grow stronger, we close the gap. And really, once the gap is closed, you now have the strength that you need for the next level. So as always with the Wednesday Word, I like to share a personal story of mine, something that got me thinking about this. And it's funny because I was in Costco when I started thinking about this concept. In Costco, there was this keyboard that they had on sale for the holidays. And I sat down at the keyboard and I started playing the keyboard a little bit. And it was a struggle to play it. Now, a lot of people may not know, but when I was in my teens and probably early 20s, I used to play the piano for my church choir. And I used to play the piano just by ear. And I remember before I was like, I think I was around, I'm going to say 15 or 16. I remember I had started playing the piano. I was doing really good playing the piano by ear. And my mother sent me to piano lessons. And when I started reading music, the process dramatically slowed down. Like I went from, okay, let me listen to this song on the radio. I'm going to pick out the keys. Okay, this is how the song goes, to like, now I got to like read. And it felt very much like when I was first learning how to read like English. It was like to he. And it's like, no, that Billy, that's the word the. It's TH makes what sound. And so it decelerated my playing ability, but it also impacted my confidence because here I was banging songs out by ear, like, oh, this is the song I want to play. This is the song I'm going to play. I was doing that. And then I reached this place, this growth gap where my mother said, hey, look, to get to the next level, you're going to have to learn how to read music. And that may not be for everybody, but I can honestly tell you that was probably what I needed to get to the next level, was to learn how to read music. And I remember it was so difficult that I just decided, you know what? I don't even want to learn how to play the piano. I don't want to learn how to read music. So I did it for maybe like a couple of months, and then I stopped taking lessons. And it was like, yeah, my ability to play by ear increased. It got me through a little bit. But the problem is that I still ran into that growth gap again. So all I did was, okay, I don't want to learn how to read music. So I declined and got really good down here playing by ear, and then was like, yeah, I'm playing by ear, but this growth gap was still in place. And so then I just stopped playing the piano altogether. And now when I sit at the piano a couple weeks ago in Costco, the thing that was like second nature to me, I didn't even have to look at the keys or anything. I knew where my hands were. I knew where the keys were. I knew what sounds they would make. All of a sudden, I'm sitting at this instrument and it feels familiar, but foreign at the same time. And that's what got me thinking about growth gaps. Is I had a choice to make. I could either continue to play by ear and probably be limited at some point when somebody says, give me E flat or E sharp or D sharp or C natural. I'd be like, hold on, I don't know how to transpose all these keys to that because I only know the sounds. I know the names of the keys and where they're at, but I only know the sounds. So when you say play something in E flat, I don't know what that really means. I know where E flat is, but that's all I know. And so I just started thinking about that in Costco, and it really showed me that this is a moment in my life where I had the opportunity is a key word, to engage with a growth gap that whether I played the piano professionally or not didn't matter. That wasn't really my overall goal. But because I chose to decline, thinking that I'll just decline to playing by ear, what happened is eventually when I hit that frustration again of not knowing how to change keys and the things that were needed to when you read music, eventually that decline became me quitting and giving up on something that I loved to do. And actually, I miss doing it now because it's like, man, I wish I had a piano here that I could just practice on, but I don't have that. And then it's like to sit at one and see that you're like, you're not even close to where you used to be. You think that you were just going to decline back to where everything was comfortable. But unfortunately, what can sometimes happen is you decline through a couple of growth gaps that you've already overcome. And really, you're starting from the ground up. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys. Really, this, I always try to make sure that my stories have some balance to them. There's plenty of stories I have where I've gotten growth gaps right. But I felt like this was more encouraging. It even to me even was more encouraging to realize that sometimes you can get a growth gap wrong, and sometimes it can cost you that particular segment of growth. But realizing that there's opportunities when we reach these growth gaps, and the frustration that comes from them is only temporal. It is only a temporary situation because once you get through the other side, you get to keep all that strength that it took for you to get there. So with that, thank you guys for tuning in. Next week, we will have a live Wednesday word. Starting next month, there will be a couple of pre-recorded Wednesday words that I put out. They'll still come out at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm sorry, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But they will be pre-recorded. But you're definitely I'm willing to engage with you in the comments on those. But you'll always know the week before if it's going to be pre-recorded or live and how you can tune in. That's one of my commitments that I will make to you. Next week's Wednesday word will be a live Wednesday word, and that will be at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. And that is on January 5th. That topic will be attention or purpose. If you want to find out what that topic's about, you have to be there. Other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget, coming soon, you will be able to access the pre-sales for my upcoming book, Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion. I cannot wait for you guys to get that book in your hands and really engage with its content. If you thought you liked Wednesday words, please understand that that book is like a year-long Wednesday word. So again, I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. If you like this video, share it. If you share it, like it. I'm always happy to engage with you in the comments on the live chat or in the comments up to 7 days after the show has aired. But other than that, until the next time I see you guys, one love, peace, and God bless. Thank you for sitting on the first row.